So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this seminar with two really inspiring people in the field of sustainable fashion. I'll read out the descriptions that I have for them, but they'll speak for themselves later on. On my left is Edwina Ehrman. She is Senior Curator at the V&A and Curator of the museum's exhibition, Fashioned from Nature. Personally, I think this is one of the most iconic exhibitions that I've seen at the V&A, and that includes the Queen, sorry. And if anyone hasn't seen it yet, you must go. It's on for 2 more days, and it makes clear the very, very tricky relationship between nature and fashion, which is basically why we're all here today. So do go and see it before it closes. In October last year as well, the V&A hosted one of the hearings of the Environmental Audit Committee into the sustainability of the fashion industry. And this is a major, major event, which was incredibly well attended. And it's something I know Edwina is very proud of. And together, these 2 events are driving forward the conversation around sustainability in public in very high-profile ways. And Ben Gleisner is the CEO and founder of CoGo, and this is an app that connects consumers and businesses for the good of the people and the planet. They've just launched in London, and they have over 50 of the top ethical retail brands listed. The app very much focuses on the good practices and products, rather like Ben, underpinned by the philosophy that people have heard enough about all the bad stuff, and this is how you can engage in a positive way with the things that you buy. And the theme of this talk, alongside the 2 themes that have been going on throughout the expo, which is the future of fabric and how fashion could be a positive force for good, the theme of this talk is a labeling system going to help shoppers to buy clothes that don't cost the planet? I'm going to start with that, actually, because labeling would be a good thing. Complicated, though, so I wanted to get some idea about details, how you envisage this might work for people. Edwina?
Labelling is incredibly problematic because, as we know, there are many very valid, very upstanding certification schemes. But labelling is also open to manipulation, either knowingly or unknowingly. So any brand can claim that they're benefiting the planet or that they are environmentally friendly. Sometimes that's a deliberate deception, and that's been proved in court cases when companies have been picked up by trading standards, and sometimes it's merely something that they just don't really know enough. So we have to think of some common labelling system, and my model at the moment in my head is something like the traffic light system that we have for food. So the traffic light system for food that we have in Britain came in 5 years ago, 2013, and the government knocked the heads together of manufacturers, supermarkets, retailers, and they came up with a system that they could agree on, which covered various aspects of food. And we all know, well, if we live in Britain, we all know them. We can't really have missed them, because over 60% of prepackaged food now have these labels on the back. So we know how much fat or saturated fats, etc., they have in them. Now, I think you might conceivably be able to come up with a system like that for clothes, but you need buy-in from a whole variety of people. And always in these new systems, there are costs involved. And the only people I think that can do that is government. Government has to bring people together. I think government has a clear role there. But even at its most simplest level, why is it that textiles are one of the only things that don't have recycling labels attached to them? Yeah. Plastics do. Yeah. And some of them have quite sophisticated labeling about exactly how recyclable they are. Food does. We have lots of regulations around electrical goods. Why aren't we encouraged to just remember that we can recycle most textiles? Well, we can recycle all textiles, and give them to somebody who knows, have more information about how the best thing that we can do with them. Yeah. And I think what we need is to encourage people, and I think this is where Ben comes in. We've got to give people rewards. We've got to enable people to make choices, but you need to feel you're doing good. And sometimes we need to be reminded in a really simple way about how we can do good. I was on a train yesterday, and I noticed that on the window of the train, which was down, it said, "Please help us. Please shut this window to save energy and to create a better environment for all our users." Now, that's a really good label, which persuaded me to yank this window closed. And I think that's the sort of message we need to get across. We need to feel emotionally good in ourselves, that we're benefiting others and the planet. In Ben's case, I think you have an even more targeted reward system.
Well, I mean, there's so many things that I wanted to say to that. I mean, I think some of this seems to be lack of awareness, that, you know, we just don't know where our clothes come from. And I think one of the reasons that we don't have labels yet is because we're still really at the beginning of the conversation, aren't we? People are only now, apart from the people in this room, but the majority of people don't know the damage that the fashion industry is doing to the planet. So the more talks there are like this and the more thoughts there are around this, the more this is likely to come into effect. I still think it's a complex proposition to put labeling. I mean, what are you labeling? How is it done? Ben, any ideas?
Sure. So we've been operating in New Zealand, hence the accent, since around 2010. And so we've got a platform that aggregates around 130 different certifications. So our whole model is built on the idea that you as an individual want some assurance around how you buy and some third party to tell you that actually this is legitimately from a factory where workers are paid good wages, or legitimately a product that can be recycled. And that requires, in our view, a third party involved. I think there are a lot of brands that do a pretty good job of communicating that assurance to you, but there's a lot of skepticism in the market. And so we like to see ourselves as sort of a trusted source of information around the environmental and social impacts of the choices you make. So we started in food and drink, so cafes and restaurants. That was where we first started, but we've slowly expanded both across the world, but within different sectors. So we're now in the fashion sector. And it is fair to say, as you mentioned, that there's actually a lag of maybe 5 years on food and drink. Like, food and drink has been the progressive sector around certifications and labeling. But I'm pretty sure that, yeah, the fashion, there's definitely a growth in that area. So we look at things like organic certifications, obviously. We look at things around circular economy. We look at a whole bunch of different labels that give you assurance around your environmental or social values being met in the products you buy.
One thing I think about labeling, which I really appreciate, is the way it connects the product to where it's come from. This is a conversation that has been had a lot in the expo, but is also something very much I associate with fashioned from nature. Because it was incredibly poignant to see a dress made out of beetle wings, and then to see the beetle, not the actual beetle, but an image of the beetle that it had come from, and to reflect on the amount of death, in that case, that had gone in to make a dress. And so connecting us with nature, I think, connecting us back with nature can only be a good thing in these circumstances.
Yeah, but I think somewhere along the line, we've lost touch with materials. And I think maybe 1970s, perhaps, when trends became incredible, well, 60s, 70s, when trends became really, really important. We had more and more synthetic fabrics around that we didn't really understand. And so fashion became much more about the designer name, the brand, the surface of the garment, what it looked like, perhaps more than what it felt like and what it was made from. And I hoped in Fashion from Nature, by exploring in a very simple way what clothes in the past are made from, it might make us reflect on what our own clothes are made from. And it certainly made, the whole exhibition has made me much more aware of my own fashion choices. Yeah. And I've been one of the problems about the labelling system we have, which is legislated, the labels inside our garments, they give us percentages of fibres, which are meaningless to most of us. We don't know what these things are or how their effect on the environment, on the people who make them. And they only give us the last country of production. And we know that garments are made in several stages often. They travel around the world on container ships to go from one country to another for the next stage in the process. So I think that is to a degree helpful, but I think things like blockchain, if you really want to know what's going on and where things came from, that involves more buy-in. But my traffic light system, just going back to my hobby horse, will be a sort of a swing tag. You know, so it's very easy to get at. I have tried rummaging in garments and shops to find out what things are made of, and you get very suspicious looks when you do that. It's slightly off-putting. People don't want you to do that. They don't know why you're doing it. And what I want to do is to try to get us to think more about materials. And to just with Fashion Revolution, who made my clothes? You know, we need to say, what are my clothes made of? And how are they made? And I think if only when we start asking of consumers, I think consumer pressure is good. Because if we have a consumer pressure, media pick up on that, and manufacturers pick up on it.
I'm still going to dwell on the challenges of what this might offer. And there's a website I know where transparency is a fashion website, and transparency is very key for this label. And it's called Honest Buy, and I don't know, and it's run by a man called Bruno Peters. And he was really early in the transparency debate, and he would list everything. I mean, he listed sort of who made the fibers
and
the
even
fabrics.
the profit margin.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, Bruno Peters' Honest Buy was is in Fashion from Nature. But when you look at that sheer amount of information, how do you get that on a label?
Yeah, I think our model of approaching this is, traffic lights are great with things like fat content, because there's actually a chemical equation that figures out how much is, in a particular product. With something like environmental or social issues, multifaceted, multidimensional, and I guess the way we look at it is we say this first. What are the issues that you as an individual care about? Some of you will value animal welfare, some of you will be worried about the climate, others will be thinking about plastics. Like, you've each got your own set of values, and our job, what we do with CoGo, is help match your values with the brands and businesses you buy from. So I think in that way, it personalizes it a bit. It does make it is complicated, is the truth of it. And I think it would be great one day to build, an algorithm that does all that, figures it all out, and creates your own digital traffic light on a product. And I guess that's what we're ultimately trying to do, is to make it personal to your values, because in the end, it's very difficult to make decisions on how much climate matters versus water versus animal welfare. So that's the challenge.
There is a website that I've been trawling through websites, and there is one, and it has it groups the garment itself. It has various tick boxes. So vegan is one, water saving is another, energy saving with a third, and then human impact. How are the workers who make these garments ethically and responsibly treated? So that's a way of segmenting.
That's exactly right. Yeah, somewhat.
Yes. Yeah.
When I used your app, actually, I found myself ticking a lot of boxes because I was going, yes, climate change is important and water use is important.
Yeah, it's hard to say. But in the end, we want to use this as a driving force for change and to inform businesses. And so if you tell a business there's 100 things that they could do, we've found businesses go, well, which one?
Yeah.
And so what we encourage people to do is choose the few issues that would really change your spending. If you saw 2 dresses and one of them was paid by someone with a decent wage, or another one was paid, done minimal impact on the climate, which one would you choose? What's the reason that would get you to move that spending? And that's what we're interested in.
Yes, I understand. I'm going to go to now one of the themes of this expo, which is, what is the future of fabric? So either based on what you know or what you would hope to see, it would be really interesting to know, first from Edwina, what you would hope to see in terms of fabrics for the future.
Well, I think we already have some business models for the production of fabric, which I think work. So fair trade is one example, where with schemes which focus on creating, ensuring a sustainable livelihood for those people who are involved in the production process, ensuring that they're employed in an ethical way, and making a sustainable product which is not going to damage the environment and benefit. It will benefit ecosystems and biodiversity. So that's one model. We also have many small-scale companies. I think many Northern European countries are particularly good at this. Small-scale companies that work very, very hard and dedicate a lot of time and research to ensuring that they are buying sustainably made fabrics. But one of the problems, I think, which was highlighted by one of our artists in residence associated with Fashion from Nature, was that a big company like Lending can make, good sustainable fabrics like Tencel or Refibra, and they can provide training for companies that want to use their fabrics, but they're their leverage ends. So beyond that, they cannot control how how the manufacturer, their customers, use the fabric. And I think that is something why we need to design in the whole life cycle of a garment, right through from concept through to end of life. So that, I think, is one of the problems. But that, I'm a pragmatic, positive person. We have existing business models. We need, obviously, a lot of education to try to widen this conversation. And we also have, what we all call the fourth industrial revolution. So we have biotech innovators like Bolt Threads. And there's a lot we don't know about biodesign. But on the other hand, I think it does offer a way forward. And these processes are based on circular systems. So that's a good thing too. And also, just one last thing, if I talk too much, I think that I've met so many amazing people during the course of the exhibition, and had really good people teaching me, and I need to learn. I still need to learn a great deal. And Centre for Circular Design at Chelsea are doing really interesting research into materials and looking at what materials are most appropriate for what you might call slow fashion, those clothes that can have a very long life, and what materials are suitable for fast fashion. And I think that's a very sound way forward. Yeah. So that things like non-wovens are maybe, something we should be exploring more for fast fashion.
Yes. That's interesting. That is actually interesting because it accepts the consumer need for fast fashion, but answers that problem through fabrics, which is really imaginative. Ben, in terms of future fabrics, what would you like to see out there? What have you seen out there already that you love?
I mean, we, with our journey in the last wee while, definitely see a world where, there's climate change, there's issues around half of the ocean with plastics versus fish. These are the issues of the world which I'm sure we'd all hand on heart say aren't the world that we want to be part of. But the challenge is, how can the choices we make in the way we spend our money, whether it's your food, whether it's your electricity provider, whether it's the clothes that you wear, how do we make it a better match between your values and what you want to see in the world and the clothes that you wear? Because at the moment, even after many years, it's still extremely hard to feel confident that the stuff that you're wearing actually does align with your values. It is incredibly difficult. And I think my vision of the future of fashion is that all of us are walking around in clothes that we actually feel fully confident are aligning with the things that matter to us. And I think if we can match that, that would be a great future.
That sounds like government, consumer, and industry all have to come together in this new, beautiful world.
It's a little utopian, but I think why not go for it?
Yeah, we have to. And then the other theme, obviously, in the expo is how can fashion be used as a force for good? And it's been fascinating asking this question, getting so many different answers actually today, very visionary answers as well. But how do you think fashion can be used as a positive force for good in creating a better world?
Well, I think that one thing that marks out designers in any discipline, and fashion is a discipline, they are incredibly creative. Fashion designers are creative, and I think we have shifted in Britain from being a major manufacturing country of textiles, We've seen, many people have witnessed the damage caused by a thriving textile industry, which was relatively unlegislated. But now that has largely shifted elsewhere. But we have a very vibrant design community. And I think when you have a community like that, you get pockets of people who become very focused on, well, we have pockets of people very focused on sustainable fashion, and they're working together and collaborating and finding ways forward. And I think what's interesting to me about fashion is that I've been working with fashion for nearly 30 years in a museum, and I've always thought it was a very, very competitive, cutthroat industry, an industry that guards its secrets closely. And what I've really noticed about the sustainable designers and the people leading sustainability in companies is they're notably collaborative. So open source comes up over and over again. Foundations like the C&A Foundation, H&M Foundation, whatever you think about fast fashion, they do put a great deal of money into research and development. And we need money, because these new innovations particularly, it takes a great deal of money to get them from small scale to becoming commercial.
Just for those of us in the audience who may not know, how would you define open source?
Well, I understand open source to be so for instance, in cradle-to-cradle manufacturing. So C&A are the first company to produce the first gold standard certified method of manufacturing denim. I didn't put that very well. But anyway, cradle-to-cradle certify manufacturing either textiles or manufacturing or both from concept through to end of life. And C&A have worked with, they now have, with Cradle to Cradle, they have all the information in the Cradle to Cradle library, so that anybody can access that information and find out exactly what they did. And so people can take advantage of all the investment that C&A put into it.
So it's really about sharing your discoveries as you make them in order to benefit others. Ben?
Very
fashion?
good. No, good responses.
Force for positive good.
Positive, we believe definitely that, as you said at the beginning, like you have to think about things, I think, in a positive lens, because there's so much sort of worry and negativity out there. But the two things when I thought about this was, firstly, when you buy things in this industry, you're affecting the people that make the stuff. There's effect around waste, there's issues on climate, there's issues around water, there's issues around animals. There's a whole lot of dimensional issues around fashion. So I guess it has both the biggest potential to cause impact, but it also has, and as an industry, a massive opportunity to actually shape the future of the world. So that's probably one thing that I'd say, as a sector, you can really drive change across the world. And then the second is, and I hadn't thought about that until I was here today, I was thinking, we all wear our clothes. It's the best way of showcasing your identity and what matters to you, because, people might not see what you have for breakfast, but they see what you wear every day. And if you can feel proud and basically inspire others through the things that you wear and the stories that they represent and what they mean to you, I think that's a really powerful way of showcasing the future through what you wear. So,
since you've developed this app, what kind of journey have you been on? What new discoveries and thoughts and philosophies have you come up with? Anything surprised you, or taken you aback, or given you new hope?
One thing, I was a definitely conscious consumer before, but I wouldn't say I thought about it with every choice. And I guess I found one of the reasons we started it was that it was just very difficult to know which choice I should make. So that's probably why myself and Melissa, who co-founded this with me, we were very frustrated as individuals trying to make choices. I suppose one thing that I've found is what immense joy it gives me to know about the people that make this jacket, and to have gone to that factory and to see those people in New Zealand this is made, making those clothes. The joy it gives me to think about the merino icebreaker, that I can know the farm it comes from. It's this sort of sense of like connection, which you mentioned blockchain and things, but data, I think, gives us that ability to connect with our products a lot more. So I guess one thing I've learned is how much the data is providing, I guess, more transparency. And then I've definitely seen, because 20 years ago, I set up a music festival to raise awareness for sustainable development, zero waste, organics, and permaculture. 20 years later, I'm like, there is a massive difference in desire and awareness for change, and that is pretty inspiring. So yeah, thank you all for coming. Nina as well for setting this up. It's like, it is truly inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And Edwina, there's something I always wanted to ask you about Fashion from Nature, which was, where did the impetus come to put on this important show? And I mean, what was your philosophy and thinking?
Well, it was my idea.
Yeah. After so many years in fashion.
Well, I've always, the idea of doing something around fashion and nature had been lurking in my mind for a long time. And I shared an office with somebody who also shared an interest in nature, the environment. We were both going through quite difficult projects at the time, and we used to kind of slightly fantasize about this exhibition. But then when I had the opportunity to propose it, I realized it couldn't just be about how fashion has been inspired by nature and what that says about our human interaction with nature. It had to be bolder than that. And so the core story, I knew that had to be about sustainability, and we had to address what, the huge challenges we face today. But I wanted it to link past, present, and future, because there are things we can learn from the past. But I wanted it to be positive, because I am an optimist. And so I didn't want people to leave the exhibition feeling hit over the head, submerged in statistics. I wanted them to feel that they were in the presence of a creative people who were all together in their different ways finding a path forward. I think that when I don't think I can ever look anymore at some of the historical garments we have in our collection in the same way. Because in the past I'd say, what an amazing floral print. And then now I look at them through a totally different lens. And I think more about the materials, and if you say the people who made them, the labor conditions have been terrible in the fashion industry, textile industry for centuries. So it's been a strange wake-up call, because all these, I knew about these things, but now they're absolutely the forefront of my mind. And I do think we are at this tipping point.
Yes. I love that idea of the shifting lens, that you've been looking through one particular lens for a while, and then the lens shifts, and then it's almost like you see the reality in a way. I mean, so much of the cotton from clothes from the past have been, come from the slave trade, for example. And I think you and I also spoke about the fact that in certain periods in history, people sort of attempted to emulate nature by covering themselves in flowers or having the feathers in their hair. So they're sort of almost aping this thing which they were simultaneously destroying, which is one of the things I took away from the exhibition, as well as the positivity. And your focus on the positivity was fantastic, actually. And so you do come away from this exhibition full of hope. I'm now going to open the floor to questions for both Ben and Edwina on really anything you'd like to talk about. The lady with the microphone is ready to go, though I can't see her. Oh, there she is. Hello. Does anyone have a question? And it would be good to ask now, because it's difficult to catch the speakers as they leave the stage, because we take them straight into a filming studio. So if you do have a question, please ask now. I can't see a thing. Yeah. Anyone? Is there one over
Yes,
there?
there's one here.
Oh, there's one here? Are you? Oh, great.
Hi. So when you were talking about transparency and writing about all the chemicals and all the different processes that clothes go through, have you come across brands such as Reformation, which tell you how many water savings have come from clothes? And do you feel that it would be best to list everything that a garment has gone through so that the consumer has an overall view of what they're buying?
I'd say that, yeah, that's definitely when you talk about sort of like full view, you probably go down a regulatory route because unfortunately companies are really reluctant to do that. Like there's always a little bit of a question mark and they often don't know about things. I mean, the ones that do, they're obviously confident about it. But yeah, I guess it would, to me, be the ideal end game is that businesses feel fine about talking about their entire supply chain and all the impacts. For now, I guess, to us, the journey that we want to take businesses on is let's highlight a couple of the good things that you're doing on that journey to help drive people towards your brand on the back of that so that you'll start doing more good things along that journey. Because we've got to take these brands with us. You know, if we start isolating them, I think you're going to end up with no change. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question on the left-hand side there.
My thoughts are a little bit rambly, and they touch upon a lot of the things that you guys talked about today. But I think I love the idea of having like nutritional facts on our product eventually. And I know that there's a lot of different companies and coalitions trying to index, trying to figure out the transparency, including your own. I think, like, my question as a brand who's trying to become more transparent, like where should we go? Like, who should we collaborate with? Like, who should we make sure our suppliers are listed in indexes? And then also, it's great that all of us are working in, a bunch of different people are coming up with ideas because then we have more opportunities for solutions for the future. But at some point, we're going to have to unify for it to actually have a huge impact in terms of the consumer level. Like, I know we were saying ideally it's going to happen, but how do we think it's going to happen? Like, what's going to be the turning point where we all band together and choose one way of communicating to our consumers, I guess?
I didn't hear all of that.
I heard it a bit, I think, yeah. So I think the question was, yeah, I guess there's a lot of brands like this one who are out there trying to do some good and they're wanting to know, well, what should we be doing and who should we be partnering with to do that good? And then sort of how can we collaborate to sort of, yeah, I guess drive change as a community. My response to that would be, I guess, together, the first thing I ask a brand is to think about, well, what is it that your customers are looking for from you or the people that you want to sell to? So understanding your end customer. As a business, it's really important to do that first. You know, you can start creating all this assurance around a certain issue that isn't something that your customers want that assurance around. So think about your customer, I'd say first. Find out from them about the things that matter. And then I'd seek out, yeah, independent third parties that are providing you with that assurance around a particular issue like labour or around water. My firm belief is that those organisations will start becoming more like credible, more scalable if we can show demand for that issue being something that matters to customers. So I think our future, as I said, utopian maybe, is that if we can all collaborate with our wallets and our values, that'll drive a signal in the market. So my previous job was an economist at the Treasury, so that's what I used to do as a job, and economics provides us with a platform to actually help drive change. And so if we can demand it as individuals, you'll respond to it as a business, and then people down your supply chain will have to sort of follow. And so I think a lot of it comes from sort of coordinated demand.
Yeah, but I don't think it's not surprising at the moment that a lot of research and development is going into developing alternative leathers. There are a number of companies which are really focusing on this, and because there is a significant demand for alternatives to animal leather, and I think that is very much consumer driven.
And I think the movement away from fur by some of the luxury brands is consumer driven. I actually spoke to someone at Yoox Net-a-Porter and they said it was all about the customer saying we don't want this anymore, which is fantastic news for the animals that are dying for this. Any other questions?
There's one at the back, yeah.
Thank you very much, Edwina and Ben, for your insights. I had a question for Ben. How did you engage customers and consumers in developing the criteria for your app? did you draw on research?
How do we research the people, like individuals buying, or the companies?
The individuals buying.
Yeah, so for many years we've been like collaborating with people around, look, what are the issues that are front of mind when you think about buying a coffee? And so it started in maybe 3 or 4, like the wages of the workers or the climate. And so over time we sort of evolve this, I suppose, research on what matters to people based on what issues people raise. So the current one has, like, I think 26 different issues around environmental waste issues, around climate, around animal welfare. And I think in the end, all our job is to be a litmus that reflects the sorts of issues around environmental and social things that matter to you. So it's a collaborative one that's importantly reflected in, well, if you tell a business that your customers care all about this stuff, we need to provide that business with an actionable thing they can do in response. So it's almost, there's 2 sides to the stuff. So you need to be able to provide, say, a demand for vegan. There needs to be solutions that the business can do and certifications that they can use to actually validate that they're responding to that demand. So yeah, the whole unifying things are Sustainable Development Goals. So everything that we do sits underneath that framework. So yeah, you can have a look online if you want more information.
Yes, I absolutely love the Sustainable Development Goals. They're actually a fantastic guideline for everything that we really should be doing. Yeah. Does anyone else have another question? Oh, one at the... Thank you.
One of the men in the room.
You're a few.
There's a few, it's great.
Thank you. What's your view about dry cleaning? Because dry clean only labels seem to be quite big within the market. We know dry cleaning's worse than cleaning in the house. Do sustainable fibers actually help that or make it worse?
Well, as somebody who tries very hard never to dry clean anything, whatever the label says, I think quite a lot of the dry clean only labels are there so that should I or somebody, should the buyer damage a product by washing it, there's no comeback. But there's absolutely no reason, in my view, why you can't wash silk. And obviously we can wash polyester and things like that. So I think, most products you can wash very, advisedly. Mixed fabrics, I think, are the problem, because if you have a mixed fabric and one fibre shrinks more than the other, then you do need dry cleaning. But there are ethical dry cleaners too. You pay more for the service, but you can find them.
Thank you. Has anyone got a final question? Oh, hello. 2 final questions. Is that okay to run on a bit? Yes, thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. You mentioned that you got a wake-up call in the way you look at fashion historical items now, after the exhibition, all of that. I was just wondering if the way fashion history is narrated should be changed, because, for example, I'm studying Glasgow and I learned a lot about paisley shawls and the history. And I think people are not aware that the cotton was, you mentioned the slave trade in cotton. I think people are not aware that the shawls that made them so proud actually came from the US, and that was grown under slavery and all of that. So I'm just wondering, as a curator, do you think, on top of revisiting materials, should there be a revolution in the way we narrate British history and all kinds of history actually, and look at it from an ecological perspective as well?
Well, I trained in a social history museum, and any curator that trains in a social history museum is trained to look at any object of material culture very holistically. And one thing I was rather astonished by was when I was reading books about different fibers, whether it's cotton or wool or whatever, and you look in the index for pollution or legislation, and they're not there. And really, they should be there, I think. I think that's something that we should be taken into account by economic historians, textile historians, when they're thinking about those individual materials. And of course, there are many very good books on the social impact of fashion. And there are some very good general books which do look in a more, at fashion from the social history curator's point of view. But I agree that one thing that I tried very hard in the exhibition to do was to bring together process and practice with aesthetics and performance, because, together they represent the industry. They're the two sides of the industry. And so for me, it was very important having the mill chimneys in the exhibition alongside the garments to remind people about people who made the garments, people who worked in those factories, the impact on the environment. And then by putting the very beautiful or interesting garment alongside it, I think that's quite thought-provoking, and we should perhaps do more of it. But there are room for many, many books. But I'm hoping to see more books with pollution in the index.
That's a really interesting question. Is there a final question? I saw a hand go up, and this will be the definite last one. No? Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. So I will say that this has been recorded, so if you feel you want to see or hear any of it again, it will be online. I'd like to encourage you to go and see the fabrics, and when you see them, handle them, think about where they've come from, connect back to their sources. And finally, when you do share on social media, if you use the hashtags, they're not up there, but it's hashtag Future Fabrics Expo. That would be great for continuing the conversation and building a community around this event. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.